Hello, everybody. Really good to see you all. And do remember, of course, that although this is being recorded, none of you are being recorded. So please do feel free, if you want to turn your videos on, but also to put things in the chat and I will ask any questions that you want me to ask. So hello, everybody. I'm thrilled today to be here with Bernard Purrier. Now, have I said your name right, Bernard?
You have actually, yes, indeed.
Oh, good. Bernard, I've actually known for a long time, but I've never actually thought to check on the pronunciation of his surname because I just call him Bernard. So Bernard is the kind of top volunteer speaker for whale and dolphin conservation, the charity. And he's going to talk to us today about his love of all things cetacean conservation and what we can all do. Now, Bernard and I met because we both share this absolute passion for cetaceans. So there's going to be a lot of love for whales, dolphins and porpoises today because we both share that love. So actually, in fact, I've just answered our first question. I was going to say, what is a cetacean? You please explain.
Right. Well, cetacean is the group name. It means sea creature, and it covers the group comprising whales, dolphins and porpoises. About 85 species. Now there are lots of subgroups within that and it gets quite complicated, but think 85 basically.
Brilliant. How many of those have you seen?
Probably about 25 at the moment in live.
Yeah.
I have a wish list at the top of which is the blue whale, of course, which is the largest living creature on the planet. Larger even than the dinosaurs were. So although I've been to the right part of the world to see them, off of or one of the places, which is off of Sri Lanka, in fact, I didn't see one. So I'm still waiting on that one. But people who have seen them say, you know, once seen, never forgotten.
I totally agree. I spent years, when I was 5, my granny took me to the Natural History Museum in London. And I don't know if you remember, there used to be that huge life-size model of a blue whale, not the wonderful skeleton of the blue whale that's there now, but the model. And I became obsessed with them. And I spent many, many years trying to see one. And I finally saw one in California a few years ago, having gone to spend several days in Monterey, where they'd seen blue whales for weeks until the week I got there. And then I went back down to the south of California, very despondent. And my friend's stepfather said, oh, there's one just up the road at Dana Point. So my friend got in the car and drove me up the next day. I've never given anyone such a big tip as I gave to that. I think I gave him more for a tip than the ticket had cost.
Really?
After we'd seen it. And it is the most incredible thing ever. Absolutely astonishing. And I knew all the facts. I knew how huge they were. Still doesn't prepare you, Bernard. Once you see it,
no,
you
indeed.
Go,
there's a funny story about Monterey. And that is that a tourist was staying in one of the hotels in the bay, looking out over the water. And they woke up in the morning and they saw what they thought was an island. And in fact, they phoned the local radio station and said, an island has appeared overnight outside my room. And it wasn't there yesterday. And they obviously got very excited about it, sent a reporter down. And it was in fact a blue whale.
Wow.
So there you go. And that is a true story. But it seems a little hard to believe, but you know, perhaps someone who's never even been aware of just how huge they can be might think that.
Yeah, it just is incredible. I mean, just the fact that you can't possibly photograph it, you know, not with a normal camera. No. And just absolutely amazing. At the top of my desperately want to see lists are the beluga and the narwhal. Those are the two. The blue whale was at the very top, and now those two have.
That's right. And of course, the beluga, one of the things I like about it is it can blow air rings, much like a relative of mine when I was a kid who could blow smoke rings. And I was very impressed with this. And my parents kept telling me it was no big deal, you know, they didn't want me to become a smoker. But I was very impressed with him for this reason. Now, the beluga will surround a shoal of fish and they'll all blow their air rings towards the fish, and they panic and they congregate in a very tight ball. And then as the air rings go up past the fish, then they just go in and get their fill of these panic-stricken, very tightly packed fish.
Fantastic. Isn't that just so efficient? Nature is amazing, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? And, you know, there's so many facts like this in this subject that just astound you, really. you know, there's certainly some more that I could give you. But I'll give you one very quick one if you'd like it.
Yes,
And that is the pufferfish. Now, the pufferfish is fairly insignificant until it gets threatened, and then it puffs up into a big ball, which is much harder for a predator to bite. And it also has a secret weapon, which is a neurotoxin, which can stun or even paralyze and kill a predator. Now, the dolphins have learnt that in some way. We don't know how, but it's now fairly common practice for usually a group of young males, surprisingly, who find a pufferfish. They'll agitate it to make it puff up, and then one of them will take it in the beak, very gently squeeze it. And when you gently squeeze a pufferfish, apparently, it releases a minute amount of toxin, the neurotoxin, and it gives them a high. And so that
dolphin form of vaping, or
absolutely. So that dolphin will then let go of it, and then they float up to the surface, looking even happier than they do normally. And the next dolphin will get it, and the whole group will each have a little squeeze of this fish. And the last one will let it go. It will deflate and swim off quite happily.
Oh,
So
brilliant. That's amazing.
It's good, isn't it? Yeah. I like that one. It perhaps shows, you know, just how intelligent they are. But how they found out in the first place, we don't know.
Exactly. And how do they that kind of learned behavior that's passed from one generation to the next?
That's right. Yes. And it's all to do with how far you squeeze it, because if you squeeze it too much and release too much of it, then obviously it will damage you.
Yeah. Oh, that's so they are so amazing. What began your love of cetaceans? Was it when you were a child?
I think so. When I was a child, I can remember, of course, we didn't see a lot of it on television. In fact, we didn't have a television until I was about 11 or 12. And even then, you didn't have the documentaries that you have today. But I can remember being very impressed with them the first time I saw them, you know, sort of in moving pictures, as it were. And then we were in Cornwall on one occasion with my parents, and we saw a solo dolphin in one of the bays. I think it was around St Ives. It had come in, and it just sort of spellbound me. I just couldn't sort of be carried away from it. And I think one of the reasons is that interest has developed is that they are wild animals, and yet they seem at times to seek out and actually help humans, which is fairly rare, to be fair, for any wild animal to do. But one example of that is in the Second World War, when a lot of ships went down with torpedoes, and the survivors were clinging on to anything that floated. And they would often be surrounded by sharks, and the sharks would be picking off the survivors one by one. And on many documented occasions, dolphin would arrive and get in between the sharks and the survivors and keep the sharks away for, you know, hour after hour until rescue came. And that's just fascinating, really. It's a behavior which came from them and not from the human side, although I bet they were very grateful. Also, people have been rescued when they've been in trouble in the sea, and they've seen this shape come up underneath them, and it's either supported them or towed them or pushed them back to the shore. You know, so that is pretty rare for a wild species to do something like that. And the irony of it, which I found out sort of fairly quickly, was that actually their only real enemies are us as humans.
Yes, and absolutely. Jean has actually put in the chat a really salient point to this. She said there's a beluga whale in the aquarium in Valencia, a beautiful animal, but it was very sad to see it confined in this way. Yes, tell us about this, Bernard, and what aquaria do.
Well, the thing is, these animals in general are very good, incredible swimmers. Some of the larger whales, the orca, for example, will swim over 100 miles a day routinely. They also, many of the species need to go down to depths to get the food that they require. They also need to keep away from the surface in very hot weather, because they can get sunburnt if their backs are exposed out into the air. And so to take any animal like that and put it in any form of pool is restricting it dramatically. And one does see, and it's recognized now, that you see behaviors of stress in these animals when they are into captivity. Even the ones born in captivity exhibit the same sort of stress, although they've never known freedom anyway, which is interesting. And of course, they don't get live food in captivity, so they lose the ability to catch their food. And this is why it's so difficult to release them once they have been in captivity for any length of time.
Yeah.
So the film, for example, that really did for the orcas was Free Willy, which was a film about an orca being released as part of a plan from a young boy. The irony there is that 3 orcas were used in the film, but none of them got released at the end, although they tried to release one of them. And then they found it was incapable of feeding itself, so they had to keep feeding it. And in fact, they realized it wasn't going to survive if they just let it go. So that never happened. And the whole thing is just not right. I mean, circuses, as we all know, used to have lions and tigers and bears, and that we've gone past that now, certainly in this country and in many countries, although you only have to go to Europe to see that happening still. So we've gone past that and we accept it and we realize it was bad. And I think the same is gradually happening about cetaceans in captivity as well.
Yeah, I think so. There's a big, on social media, for example, anybody who's on social media, there's a hashtag captivity kills, where people write about things such as dolphin shows, whale shows, aquaria. And it's just, something that is really captured the imagination, but for so long, and yet it doesn't seem that we're really getting through to the people who need to know about it. And it's deeply frustrating the number of times people say, oh, it's okay. They look so happy. What do you say when they say that? Look, they're smiling.
Indeed. And before I answer that, can I just show you a picture?
Yes, please.
Here. Right, there we go. There. Right. So can you see that?
We can.
Okay.
Yes, we can see it on the slide, the full slideshow. If you press the slideshow thing at the top, it'll.
Yes, indeed.
Back to from the beginning.
Yeah.
Along to the far end from the beginning. Yeah.
I've tried. It's yes. Okay. Hang on. It's being hidden by a box at the moment. But
yeah, we can see that one.
Yeah. Okay. But this was taken in the Moray Firth, which is just to the east of Inverness in Scotland. It was taken by one of my colleagues in the charity WDC, and I like this one because it shows them playing, and it also shows that facial expression, which looks like a smile. Now, it's not a smile, it's a fixed expression. They cannot change it. It's one that the captivity industry have used to say, look how happy our animals are in captivity. And, it's completely wrong, but most people aren't going to challenge that when they hear it. And they think it is good because they know that we can smile and we only smile when we're happy.
When you see a dolphin skull, you can actually see that it's smiling. So as you say, they can't change that, whether they're happy or sad.
That's right. Now, there was one more that I wanted to show you, which was just
to resume slideshow. Can you see that just above there? That should let you do it.
Right.
It's where there's a little highlighted box.
There's this box at the top, which is showing me mute and stop video and all this sort of thing, which has gone on top of it, which I can't get rid of it. Maybe no. Okay. Right. Okay. No. Okay. So basically, this is just showing you that the calf has got the same sort of expression right from the time of its birth. And my third one that I wanted to show you was
It's
just
really
how
gorgeous.
good their parenting is. You know, the mothers will look after them usually for the first year, 2 years of their lives, depending on the species. And in some of them, in particular the orca, the grandparents do a lot of the parenting as well, to allow the parents to actually go off to hunt for food. And they're brought up by a group of the grandparents. And in fact, the female orca will stay in the group that they're born into in most cases for the whole of their life. And basically, going back again now, and basically, in a group, you will have the calves, the parents, the grandparents, the great-grandparents, and even the great-great-grandparents at times. And if one of the females goes missing, then the group will actually wait for them. And that's been demonstrated on a number of occasions when a female has stranded on a beach, and the family will, or the pod, will wait outside, usually about 5 miles out or so, for up to several days.
Wow.
Before they come back. Whereas if one of the males goes AWOL, they're not bothered at all, because they expect them to, when they're late teenagers, to go off for the breeding pool with other pods.
To form another family group. Yeah. Fascinating. Gosh, that's amazing. They wait for so long. Well, so how did you first, tell us about WDC and how did you first become involved with them?
Well, I took an early retirement from a career which was nothing to do with cetaceans whatsoever. I qualified in medical microbiology, and I worked in the health service for about 12 years. I then did 2 years of research in the medical school in Southampton. And then I joined the pharmaceutical industry, and in fact retired from Glaxo. Took an early retirement because there was a very nice package on the table, and I thought, right, this is going to give me some freedom to go off and do other things, which I did. And I have known about the charity, but I hadn't been aware that its headquarters were within about 10 miles of where I lived, which is unusual because I live in just outside Bath, and the headquarters of this charity are in Chippenham, which is not known for its coastline, that's for sure, in Wiltshire. So very surprising that it was there. But I went along and had a chat with them and expressed an interest in becoming involved with them. And I joined them and went on a very steep learning curve with them, and became one of their speakers within the next sort of 3-4 months, I suppose. And it's gone on from there, and it's developed to a point where now we get quite a few requests for talks and such like. And I like to be able to spread the word, really, because I think my view is that if you can spread the interest, get people actually more interested than they perhaps thought they were about this subject, then it can only help, especially if you want to ask them to do something about trying to prevent, say, for example, commercial whaling, which happens in a lot of countries, or captivity, which happens pretty much around the world, really. There are currently about 50 orcas in captivity around the world in various parks. And it's documented that at least 160 of them, 160 orca have actually died in captivity since that started, which, as I said before, was partly due to Free Willy, because that got everybody interested in the orca. A lot of people who had not been interested in it at all, and then suddenly wanted to see one. So the parks then realized they had to get them in to create the demand and such like, or to justify the demand. And they were catching them from the wild at that point. And if you take them out of the wild, orca in particular, because they're so family orientated, they do very badly. And half of the ones you took from the wild would be dead within 6 years. Wow. Although in the wild they can live up to the age of 80. So that is a definite reason not to do it. And in fact, taking them from the wild was pretty much banned several years ago. And the parks went over to breeding them in captivity instead. But SeaWorld has actually said about 4 years ago now, that they won't replace the ones that they have as they go.
Good.
So, which
Well,
is a
that
start,
is a
isn't
huge
it?
step forward, because if SeaWorld is going to do it, then hopefully other places will as well. Before we get on to commercial whaling, which I want to talk about, because I think a lot of people don't realize, sadly, that still happens. What can we do? What can us as Goldster members do to try and bring about the end to these kind of dolphin shows, whale shows, and general kind of cruelty of captivity?
Right. Well, the first thing you can do is not to buy a ticket to go to see one.
Yes.
And a lot of holiday companies still are actively selling that idea. In fact, if you arrive in Tenerife, one of the first things you see at the airport is a huge poster about the park that is in Tenerife there. So the first thing is not to attend. If you want to take it further, then it's worth writing to an MP, to your MP, because they feed back, and every year there are meetings of the, this is more towards whaling to be fair, but there's an international meeting every year, and the UK feeds into that with its thoughts and such like. So that's always a thing to do. And having spoken to an MP quite recently, they said actually the more letters they get about any particular subject, the more they do something about it, because it all relates to future votes for them, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there we are, everybody. When you've got a spare moment, please write a letter to your MP about anything like this that you've seen. And also share about on social media as well, because I think a lot of people, I'm sometimes horrified by people who send me photographs of themselves with a captive dolphin, saying, look at me swimming with a dolphin, and think that I'm going to think it's sweet, whereas it actually just hurts me, physically hurts to see this. I think it's the cruelest thing. It'd be like aliens coming and taking humans back to be kept in a kind of captivity show on their planet. It's just astonishing that people think this is acceptable. How about writing to tourist boards?
Yes, and equally, some of the tourist companies.
Yeah,
I know that WDC is involved in a campaign at the moment with a number of the biggest names to say, hang on, are you really aware of what you're advertising people to go and see? And it's working with some of them, but not with others at the moment, and they're still work in progress on that.
About to put in the chat the website address of WDC, which is uk.wales.org, for anybody who wants to check out the work of this amazing charity.
Yes, it's got a lot of very useful stuff on it as well, including a lot of photos which will help identify species if you come across them at all.
So yes, tell us about that and how the different kind of identifications.
Well, size is a very important one. What a lot of people don't know or even think about, why would you? The group has either got each species has either got teeth or it hasn't got teeth. It's either toothed, or it has baleen, which are strands of keratin in the mouth looking like a curtain, which strain out the solid matter that the whale can get into its mouth. Huge mouth, which goes through the water like that, and they go up to the surface, open the mouth slightly, and use that huge tongue as a plunger to push out the water, which comes out between the baleen strips, and anything solid they caught gets caught in those, and then they move the tongue around the mouth as you would move your tongue around your teeth if you've got a toffee stuck on it. And then everything drops down into the mouth and they can swallow it. But the point I was going to make was that if they've got teeth, they have one blowhole, which excuse me, which is obviously the hole up at the top of the head that is like our nostrils. If they have baleen, then they have two blowholes. And so when you're looking down on one in the water from a ship or from the shore or whatever, it's excuse me, it's very obvious whether they've got one or two.
Yeah, so you get that very distinctive kind of like the V-shaped blow that looks so amazing when you
That's
kind of
right.
go and see humpbacks, but it's just incredible.
And
Yeah.
you know that if it's two blowholes, that narrows it down from about 85 species or so down to about 15. So there's a start. There's the size of them. There's where the dorsal fin on the back, the shape of it. Where is it, near the head or is it further back on the body? There's a whale which you can see around the UK called the minke whale, and that has it has a white band across each flipper. So again, that from looking down on one in the water is an obvious thing. So it's like there are a lot of sort of clues to it once you know what you're looking for, really. But having said that, there are a lot out there I'm sure I couldn't identify either at this moment.
Yes. And I'm going to put in the chat as well now. This is the WDC current campaign against this. They've got several campaigns, but to end captivity. So please do, everybody, have a look at that and see what you can do. I went to Tenerife a few years ago, specifically to go whale watching, because it's one of the few places in Europe, I believe, that you can whale watch year round, and they have pilot whales that are resident there. And as you say, the first thing I saw was this, sign for a dolphinarium, and I was so disappointed. I thought, when you're on an island that is surrounded by cetaceans, why would you put them in a tank when people can go whale watching cheaply and easily from the island itself? It seemed absolutely insane to me. So yes, as holidaymakers, we can do a great deal in terms of responsibility. And I did actually kind of tweet with fury to the Tenerife Tourist Board. They didn't do anything. They didn't get back to me at all. But hopefully quite a few other people maybe saw that. So, and it's good if you're booking with a company and you see that they offer these things. Yeah, tell them that you're unimpressed. That's a really good way. So tell us about commercial whaling, because I think a lot of people are not aware. We think, that Save the Whale, the big movement in the 60s and 70s, that it was all fine and nobody hunts whales anymore. But tell us what the sad truth is.
Well, of course, the whaling period, which started in the last century, almost did for a number of species to extinction. And that major catch now that it has stopped, but there are still some countries that continue, and I think that it would be no surprise to anybody that certainly Japan is one of the major ones, Norway also, the Faroe Islands, and
Iceland.
And Iceland, that's right. And we, the opinion of many people now is that this actually isn't something that it perhaps could have been justified in the past to a degree, because they needed various things. The oil, for example, from the sperm whale was used when you couldn't get oils for fuel and such like that we all have now. The meat was eaten a lot more. And it's very interesting that even in countries that continue whaling, that the younger generations are not impressed to the same degree that older generations were.
Well, that's good.
And I was speaking to some Norwegians, young Norwegians, not long ago, and they said, "Well, we would never eat it. Well, the only time we see it served is when we go visit our grandparents." And then we make the point that we actually don't like it very much, and it's not right. So this is gradually a mindset change anyway.
Good. Yeah,
which is really, really good. But there is no doubt that whaling still goes on, and it can be very cruel, because although it started off way back with little men in little boats with handheld blades, it's now developed to harpoons which have explosive heads on them.
Oh, so
and the idea is that you fire at the animal, the harpoon goes in and explodes and kills the animal. But in a high percentage of cases, it doesn't actually kill the animal. The animal is then brought back on the line to sit beside the boat in the water while it bleeds to death, which is incredibly cruel. And we know they have advanced nervous systems. And we also know that if they see a mother and a calf, that they'll sometimes just take the calf first because they know the mother won't leave it. It's just,
so it's deeply cruel.
We should have got past this by now.
We really should have done.
And so, obviously anything that anybody can do to register their dislike of this is a very good thing.
Yes. Yeah, and please do. In fact, I'll put the link in here from the WDC page, the Stop Whaling page. We've got a couple of comments here. Jean says it's much more exciting to see whales and dolphins at sea. Oh, I totally agree with you, Jean. It's my favorite thing to do. Tricia says, I went on a tourist boat to see dolphins in Madeira. I didn't see one, but my husband saw them playing for ages from our hotel balcony. That's like that advert, that chocolate advert, where the guy's waiting to see the panda and then he stops and has a chocolate bar and goes back, and the panda's done all this in front of his camera while he's not looking. I think that's pretty much, Tricia, what they like to do.
A highlight for me was in March of this year. I was in the Caribbean, and I went on a whale watching trip, and we found a sperm whale with a calf, and the two of them were just floating on the surface.
Wow.
And the boat did the correct thing. It shut its engines off, and we just drifted and completely didn't panic the animals at all. But we got relatively close to them, and on the boat, in fact, many people were crying with emotion.
I've done that, definitely.
And it is interesting to see that, and then eventually the tail went up, which signified that they were going to do a deep dive, and off they went. And we couldn't have left them at that point because we couldn't have started the engine up again, being as near as we were to them. So we would have had to sit with them quietly until they went. But it was a marvelous time, and I looked around and I thought, the emotion that's being shown from people here, they won't forget that.
No.
They'll all go home and tell people about it. And watching whales or dolphins is quite addictive.
It is very addictive.
Yeah, that's right. And it certainly forces people to go to certain holidays where they think they'll see them for that reason. That sort of governs where they go, which is great.
Yes, and I would say as well that if you are going to Japan or Norway or Iceland, please make a booking a whale watching trip, because once these governments start to realize that living non-captive cetaceans are far better for the economy than a cetacean on your plate. I mean, what would you have as your tips for if you're going to somewhere that offers whale watching trips, and there's often some really unscrupulous operators, what would you tell people to look out for? What would be the best way to go and see dolphins or whales or porpoises?
Well, don't try to avoid one that has a guarantee that you'll see them, because often that can mean that when the public are not on the ships, they go out and feed them. So the animals associate the boat with the animals. They associate the boats with food. Therefore, when the boat goes out full of people, they'll come up to it because they think they're going to be fed. Now, the problem with that is that they go up to boats that have nothing to do with it, and then they get propeller injuries or shunt injuries or whatever. So there is no guarantee that should ever be given with a wildlife trip. Okay, and people who do give them are always suspect, in my book, at any rate. So I would avoid that. If you see that on a thing, you'll see them. It may be true, of course, but they shouldn't be claiming it, really. Because part of the fun of it is that if it's that obvious and it's going to happen that regularly, then it's not so exciting as actually finding something when you might not have done. So WDC has actually looked at a lot of operators all around the world and looked at the way that they work and also has got a list of them. In fact, on the website, you'll be able to find it, of recommended ones which are doing it properly, which means you don't ever get in between animals of the same group. You never get between a mother and a calf. You don't chase them. If they go off, they go off. And if you do get anywhere within a reasonable distance of them, shut the engine off, just drift. And then you're not going to disturb them, and they'll stay with you if they want, and they'll go if they want. And very much on their agenda rather than the paying public, really.
Yes. Yeah, and some places, some operators will say, if we don't see one, you get another free trip, which I think is a good way of then, they're not guaranteeing it, but they know that you're going to come back. So I did that in Canada. Still didn't see anything, but at least I got 2 trips out of it.
Yeah, that's right. I've been to off of Vancouver Island, where it's supposed to be one of the best places in the world to see orca, and didn't see a single one.
That was exactly what happened to me. Yeah.
And my neighbour, an elderly couple who live, they don't anymore, but they were living near me, next door at the time, went on a similar trip about 3 weeks later and came back with all these amazing photos of all the orca spy hopping, which is when they balance on their flippers and look around, all just surrounding the boat.
Wow.
And you think, what, hang on, what's going on here?
Well, that's cheering to hear, because I was told in Canada that the reason that I wasn't seeing them is because of overfishing, and that the orca are having to go further and further out because the Canadian fishing boats are basically taking all their food. So the patterns of the orcas around Vancouver have really changed, and so I'm really glad that your neighbour did see them, that there are still some there.
This is going back probably 8 or 9 years, so that would sort of fit in with what you're just saying. But I mean, the problems of overfishing are very true, and there are a new group of scientists now that would have brought together in the mid-noughties, called fisheries scientists, to examine all of this and the way that so many species of fish are becoming less in number due to overfishing, amongst other things. And in fact, their prediction was that it could well be that unless we changed our ways, there would be no fish left, or very, very few, within 50 years. And you think, that's incredible. Because so much of the world depends on fish to keep its human population going.
Yeah.
So fishing has got to be sustainable. And the other thing I would say that people could do is they could mention MPAs. Now, MPAs are marine protected areas. They're areas of the oceans which are very controlled, and you're not allowed to commercially fish. You're not allowed to scour the seabed with nets, which destroy, of course, all the flora of fauna on the. It's a bit like ploughing a field. And some areas now, in the fishing areas, are effectively ploughed about 7 times a year, which means nothing can ever grow there to survive.
The coral and damages everything.
That's right. So marine protected areas. Now, the fisheries scientists have said that in order to completely sustain the oceans and the fish stocks and pretty much make life good for everything that lives in the sea, you need marine protected areas which would cover about 30% of the oceans. Now, that's probably never going to happen, but equally,
wouldn't it be amazing if it did?
At the moment, the figure is about 3%, 3 to 4%. Now, the UK is doing quite well on this. We've got marine MPAs around the UK, and we're covering quite a good percentage, but we are so small on a map of the world that we need everybody else to be doing it as well. But Scotland is ahead of the game on this one as well, which is good news. there's no doubt where they have done it, then there've been some MPAs that have been around for some years now, and they measured the fish stocks in one which was off the coast of the States towards Canada, and the fish, after 7 years, the population of fish was 4 times what it was before they started it.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, it is something that will work if you can do it. Yeah. But it does need, of course, policing.
Yes.
How do you police anything that happens in the oceans, especially in international waters where no one country is actually owning them?
Yeah.
So it's not an easy thing to do, but it's certainly, MPAs are something that I've written to the MP about as well, and got a letter, so that's another thing you could do.
Yeah, another thing to write to your MP, and also, I guess, to buy sustainable fish. If you're buying fish, make sure it only comes from a sustainable source, which I think most supermarkets here are pretty good with, aren't they? But tell us about that. Is there anything that we should be looking out for or avoiding?
Well, there's another charity, which is the marine charities. Have a look on their websites, because a number of them do little pocket traffic light systems for guides as to what you should and shouldn't eat. So red you should avoid, orange very occasionally, and green, okay, that's generally sustainable fish that are okay to go for. And also there's a branding, the MRC branding, which is on fish that you can buy in packets, certainly, the supermarkets and such like, which show that they are within the green band of fish that should be chosen rather than others. And equally, we need to ask, if we're buying fish, we need to make sure we're buying fish that is in sustainable groups. And we should also be able to develop a taste for some of these which are sustainable, but we haven't tried yet. Which,
really good point. Yeah.
Because we all, so many people stick to cod or plaice or haddock, and they won't try anything else. So we do need to do that.
Well, I've put the link to the Marine Conservation Charity as well in there, mcsuk.org. So if you want to find out more about what you could do as a sustainable or eco shopper. I'm going to come back to you in just a second, Bernard. I'm quickly going to tell everybody what's coming up next. And then I've got some more questions for you about how people can actually go cetacean spotting themselves. So, excuse me, just to let you know what's coming up on the book club. Your next book of the month, by the way, is with Humphrey, and that is George Orwell's Animal Farm. That's not till the end of the month, but just so that you know what to be reading. And on Thursday, we have Humphrey talking to He Zhihong, and I don't know if I've said that right again, Adam, I keep trying, described as the John Grisham of China. It's going to be really fascinating. I'm back on Friday with Joe Treasure, the novelist. His new book is called The Book of Air, which is quite extraordinary because it was written before COVID, but envisaged a deadly airborne virus that destroyed society and gave rise to a community of survivors whose rules and rituals were based on a close reading of Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. He's also going to be talking to us about the poems he wrote in lockdown and his new performance he's doing with them, as well as his first 2 novels, The Male Gaze, inspired by his experiences in LA, and his second novel, Besotted, in which he drew a lot on his family memoirs. And then next week on the 16th of June, I am talking to Leslie Thompson, and she was recommended to me by Ellie Griffiths, for those of you who love Ellie Griffiths' work. And she is a crime writer. She's got a new book coming out very soon, which is called The Companion. And she's also the author of the series of crime novels called The Detective's Daughter. Now, coming up on PPG, next Tuesday, it's Humphrey with Heidi Mansfield, who spent her life looking after children with special needs. and is a founding trustee of the charity Activity Station, which offers fun and exciting outings and activities for people with disabilities. Rosie Stancer is back on the 21st of June talking to the expeditioner and logistics whiz Stephen Jones, who's worked in Antarctica. Bet you've seen some amazing sea life there. And then on the 28th of June, Alistair Hicknell is back talking to Andrew Balding, one of the most established flat trainers in Britain. So to come back to us today, Bernard, if anybody wants to go whale watching or dolphin watching around the UK, where should they be heading to? And how many different species can they see around our country?
Well, do you know that a good proportion of those 85 species will come through British waters at some time of the year. Some of them are much harder to spot. Even the blue whale passes by the UK, but several, miles out to sea, and very unlikely to see it. But what I would say is that most places now have become aware of, certainly in the UK, of the value of whale and dolphin watching. And certainly a place to which I like and have tried to get to several times a year is Pembrokeshire in Wales. And they're very geared up to it now, and they have some very good operators down there, off of St David's and further up as well, Cardigan Bay, such like. And the species there, you certainly got the bottlenose, the common dolphin, minke sometimes, sometimes the harbour porpoise, and on one occasion off of St David's Point there, we were actually surrounded on a rib by a pod of common dolphin that stayed with us for about 10 minutes. Wow. And they were actually swimming from one side of the boat to the other under it, almost like a dare, and it was just absolutely fantastic. And the chap in charge of the boat, even he was quite, so this is quite unusual, but he said the way to keep them with us is to be interesting. He said, I'll put the speed up a bit. And he put the speed up, and a rib can go pretty fast, as you know, but is unlikely to be able to go faster than many of the dolphins and whales. And they stayed with us. And he said, if we got fed up with them, I just need to cut the engine and they'll go off very, very quickly. And that's absolutely true. They love the movement, yeah. And they'll go along beside the boat like this, and really, really good. So Pembrokeshire is a good one. Scotland, of course, has got a lot of places that do whale and dolphin watching, certainly on the Western Isles. So it's pretty good. I mean, it's one of these things where Google will help you dramatically. Where would I whale watch in a particular area? Definitely. And it'll come up with the answers, really.
But basically, there are lots of places you can see them. I went whale watching in Scotland a few years ago, and it was a beautiful sunny day. And I will tell you, take as many layers as you can possibly wear, because we went out from Tobermory and we went out for about 2 hours. And I'd taken a lot of layers because I'm always cold. They ended up giving us all kind of like jumpsuits. We all looked like we were in Guantanamo Bay, orange like oilies. We had so many layers on, but we did see minke whales eventually, which was amazing. But it's one of the coldest times I've ever been whale watching, and that was August in Scotland. And as I say, on the shore, it was actually pretty lovely and warm day, but it was amazing to see. And there are, just having a quick look on Google, everybody, there are lots of places. And I'd also say, which I don't know if you agree with, smaller boats are always better, aren't they, Bernard?
Oh, yes, they are. I think for several reasons, but one main one is that if you're on a large boat with a lot of people, and they're spotted on the port side, everybody goes there. And if you're not quick, you can actually not get very near to the rail to look over. Yes. So to be on one where everybody is perhaps seated around it, so everyone's got a little space by the edge. And a lot of the operators, they know that if you spot them on the port side, everyone on the starboard side is unhappy. So they'll turn around. They'll try and get it so that everybody has a look at what's available. Orca, probably Vancouver is one of the spots, although neither of us have been lucky on that occasion. The blue whale off of Sri Lanka is supposed to be very good. And of course, there are lots and lots of sightings off the east coast of the US and Canada. And South Africa is very good, although I've not been down there myself personally yet. And Australia. And of course, you've got Hector's dolphin, which is the little dolphin, about a metre long. And that lives off of New Zealand. And that is an endangered species, as are about a third of all the species, but appears to be more static in its numbers these days than it was before. And the hope is that it's actually going to start increasing a little bit again, which is great.
Oh, I hope so. We have a couple of comments here. So once Ellen says, once in Vancouver, we didn't see any orcas on the day of our visit. Next day, right on TV, it was reported the biggest pod of orcas was in there off Vancouver. We were gutted. Yeah. But she also asks, is there a risk of an orca surfacing right under the tourist boat?
There is that risk, but it's very rare. What they have noticed is, and this is something I picked out of the press just last week, so some of your viewers may be aware of this. It was in the Times last Sunday or the Sunday before. Orca have been attacking smaller boats off the coast of Portugal in the last 2 or 3 years. And they don't know why, but they've been actually attacking them and biting at the rudders. And to such an extent that small boats less than 15 meters have actually been recommended not to go to certain areas at the moment. And they don't know why they're doing it, but one theory is that the fishing boats have moved into that area and are taking a lot of the fish, which presumably would have been food for the orca.
And so the orca are attacking it to stop the boats coming to get their fish.
That's right. So if you've got a copy of the last 2 Sunday Times, have a look in there, because there's an article about it in there. And I was very interested in that. It's something like about 100 different reported attacks since 2020.
Wow.
And that is quite worrying, because you're not sure whether they are going to do any damage to the boat. The more
it also means people will start becoming aggressive towards the orca again, which is extremely depressing.
Indeed, it is. That's right. So it's got to be looked at quite closely, that particular thing. Now, the humpback whale, which comes out, turns over, and drops back into the water again, has on occasions miscalculated and gone out near a boat and actually dropped back over the boat. And one of those was on YouTube for a long time, because it did quite a bit of damage to it broke the mast of the boat.
Yeah.
The only injury to anybody on the boat was actually a broken arm for somebody who fell backwards. But again, when you think the whale is bigger than the boat it landed across, it's quite remarkable. It didn't sink it.
It is remarkable.
But that's entirely accidental, not intentional whatsoever. And sometimes the orca will follow boats in certain parts of the world with a calf, and they're using the boat to teach the calf how to follow moving objects.
Right, how amazing.
And the first thing you notice when this orca is only perhaps 20 feet behind your ship or boat, if you speed up a bit, I think, to try and get rid of it, but you're never going to get fast enough to get rid of it, because an orca can swim at 35 miles an hour, and very few boats can ever get that fast. So then they start to just move around like this to try and shake it off, and it's exactly what the orca wants, because it's following a moving object. And the only way to actually get rid of it is to cut the engine, stop the boat, and it will be gone with the calf very, very quickly, because it'll be looking for another one that's moving.
I saw orcas in New Zealand, and it was amazing. They see them 5% of the time. So maybe it made up for the time in Vancouver.
Yeah.
We were actually
Yeah.
going out to see Brutus whales is normally what
Yeah.
you see there. And this orca came out within 30 minutes, just leaving Auckland, the centre of Auckland, harbour in the centre of Auckland. And so many New Zealanders just don't even know they can do it. It's all tourists going. It's extraordinary. And this orca left the group and came over and was just people watching. It was fascinating. She was just, they'd obviously had to cut the engine because there were so many stations around. And there was a researcher from the university on the back of the boat with a long lens. She had to pull her camera in because she thought the orca, she was actually going to inadvertently touch the orca. And I took some fantastic photos just with my phone. And when I put them on social media, I had to point out this was not an orca in a tank because the water was so clear and it was so close. It looked like I'd been to some horrible, whale show. But this orca was fascinated. She was just looking at all of us, just like we'd gone out to look at them. And it was such a humbling moment to think, this is a whale looking at us thinking, are you odd things? What are you doing in my water?
Indeed, so inquisitive. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
we've got a comment here that says, I saw dolphins often in the Bay of Biscay on the way to Spain. Yes, and dolphins and whales in New Zealand, brilliant. New Zealand and Australia are amazing.
And there's one area that I didn't mention, which is near us, relatively near us, and that's the Mediterranean, which has a surprising number. It has a number of fin whale in it up around where France, the France-Italian border, Liguria. And the fin whale is the second largest cetacean. So it's smaller than the blue whale, but it's still a very impressive animal.
That's pretty amazing.
And I've seen orca in the Mediterranean. They were. Wow. I was going out through the Strait of Gibraltar on a boat, and you could see the fins there waiting. There are 3 of them, and they wait while the tide changes a bit. And although there's not a lot of tide going in and out of the Mediterranean, it does bring the fish in with it. And they wait there for the tide to change to catch the fish as they come through that strait, which is quite narrow. So it's well worth looking at whale watching trips along the coast of the Med as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. So sadly, we're running out of time. I could talk to you about cetaceans for hours, but thank you so much. So just a quick recap, everybody, for our Goldster members. Things that you can do to kind of help change the way that the world is treating cetaceans is, as Bernard said, write to your MP, write to tourist agencies, tourist companies, tourist boards for local places that have dolphinaria or aquaria where they keep cetaceans captive. Buy sustainable fish. If you're buying fish, please make sure it's sustainable. Register your dislike of commercial whaling with your MP. Do think about what Bernard said about how his MP said the more letters they receive on a subject, the more likely it's going to be that it gets some airtime. And we have the International Whaling Conference every year. When about in the year is that, Bernard? When should people be writing to their MPs?
It's generally around sort of May, June, July time. So it'll be coming up quite soon, I think. And it's in a different location each year. I don't know where it is this year actually, but it's certainly something to which we send representatives as the UK. And they every year they vote again on whether they should continue the ban on commercial whaling, and that vote has been changing slightly with the countries voting for a renewal of that commercial whaling. And some of the countries are countries that haven't even got any coastline, and you think, well, why
is that coming from? Is that a bribe? Or
and you find that on some occasions that it's certain countries that are whaling countries have been helping them financially with various projects and such like, and you can't help thinking, well, is that vote part of the deal?
Absolutely. And the other thing is, book whale watching trips in places like Japan or Norway or Iceland if you're going. And the other thing I'd really like to say, which we haven't touched on, is please, if you're on holiday in one of those places, don't just think I'm going to try whale meat just this once. Because that is why I remember in Iceland, there was a big campaign a few years ago with Icelandic people saying, we don't eat whales. The whaling industry is buoyed up by tourists who say, oh, I'm just going to eat it this once. So please, please, if you're going to somewhere like that, don't be like Kate Middleton's sister Pippa, who went to Iceland and then came back and wrote articles about eating whale carpaccio, and not surprisingly got into a lot of trouble. Bernard, thank you so much. It has been absolutely brilliant. And thank you for everybody for your comments. I'm glad that you've enjoyed this. And do as well tell your other Goldster members and your friends who haven't seen this, that they can watch this on Catch Up. It will, of course, soon as Ben's done all his work on it, it will be up and available to be watched by everybody on Catch Up. It's been a real pleasure, Bernard. Enjoy your next trip to wherever it is. And I hope you see lots of cetaceans. And I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that you see that blue whale. It took me a long, long time to see it. And it took me about 40 years before I finally saw one. So you must be ripe for seeing one sometime very soon.
Well, I hope so. I have my fingers crossed also.
Take care. Thank you very much, everybody. And Bernard and I are going to turn off our videos now, and then we'll end the meeting. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.